Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to the Ummahpreneur podcast. I'm so excited to bring you an amazing guest today, Brother Abubakar Sherif, who is the founder of Qariyb, a revolutionary platform that helps connect Muslims with events in their local area and really allows them to discover what's happening around them and how they can connect with meaningful members of their community, inshallah, and really foster this feeling of ummah and community that sometimes we're missing in the Western world. And for those of us, really not finding those spaces sometimes even within masajid. So you're solving that problem, and I love the way that you're doing it, Abu Bakr. And so I want to talk to you today, ask you some questions about how you came up with this idea, what you're doing to build it, and ultimately some of the lessons learned along the way. So welcome to the podcast. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Thanks for having me, Abby. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you, brother. So I like to start my episodes by just learning a bit more about the individual and the audience as well. So I'd love to ask you, can you tell us more about what you were going through when you first came up with the idea for Qarib? Where did it stem from?
How the idea of Qariyb came about, I had moved to Dallas, Texas after living in the Middle East for about 5 years and coming back and having to pretty much integrate myself with the community here after being away for a while. And I've heard all these wonderful things about Dallas, Texas, as you might have heard, people migrating here from all over the US and Canada and other parts of the world. But the challenge I found was I didn't know what was happening right around me, even though these things were taking place. So normally how I find my community wherever I go is through basketball. I play basketball and I usually find good group of brothers to connect with through basketball. I couldn't find that either.
Hmm.
So what I did then was I started talking to other people in the local masjid, and they told me, yeah, there are lots of things going on, but you have to join this WhatsApp group or download this Telegram.
Yeah.
So I thought to myself, there has to be a better way to find out things with as an outsider, especially, and that's how the idea kind of evolved. And really, what pushed me to it, funny enough, there was an entrepreneur, a Muslim entrepreneur event taking place in Dallas, and I had heard about it through word of mouth, and I was very excited. And the gentleman who told me about it never got back to me, and so pretty much I didn't have the information in time, and I ended up missing that event. Later to find out that I saw a newspaper ad of the event in the local message, and it just blew me away that I discovered that event that way. So I was like, no, we have to use technology to kind of promote our events.
Hmm. So you're essentially trying to bring, the Muslim community, the message, the organizations into the modern age and be like, all right, there has to be a better way of communicating. And of course, that makes total sense. My question to you is, tell me a bit about yourself before we dive deeper into the idea. What were you doing at the time, and what do you currently do right now? So, are you currently working? Are you a student? What's your background?
Yeah, so my background, thanks for asking. My background is in learning technology. So I've been designing learning training programs over the last decade, as well as implementing software EHR systems. It's called electronic health record. So I'm doing that. That's what I was doing in the Middle East, working with hospitals and pretty much implementing software solutions. So I've done that for a while, and currently my focus is has been Qarib. My background is in consulting, so I navigated and now focus on Qarib.
Amazing. So, look, you already have a background where you were helping organizations essentially kind of modernize with the use of technology, it sounds like.
Precisely. My actual first stint with when I was living in Qatar at the time, I was designing learning programs for hospitals, and the idea came to me then to kind of venture out and see if I can get clients on my own. So back in 2014, a colleague of mine, we both started an e-learning company, and we pretty much were going around to the different hospitals and small organizations to say, hey, we have this company. It's an e-learning company, and we can customize learning solutions. So that's really where I got my first experience with building a startup from scratch. We were a bit too early because it was 2014. Fast forward to 2020 pandemic. Now the online industry has boomed now. So, but that experience has led over to where I'm doing now with Qariyb and trying to do another startup again.
Hmm. So how long have you been working on Qariyb right now?
So I've been working on Qariyb now for about 2.5, 3 years.
Amazing.
Um, Initially, when I started, when I had discovered the problem, I had no idea what I wanted to build. It
Hmm.
was like, okay, I have this idea. Okay, what do I build? And I guess that was a good thing. Normally, you hear of stories where people are building a solution or product without the demand. But the good thing here that this there was a demand. I just had to figure out a solution. So one of the very first things I did to kind of validate what I was doing was create a unified calendar app for the entire city of Dallas. But it was a very manual approach. I would sign up to different newsletters in the community and have users send me their events. But as I would load these events onto this calendar, I noticed that this was a very laborious process. So if anything needed to get changed, I would have to then go in and do it. But
Hmm.
it kind of validated it because people were interested in having their events promoted. They just didn't know any other alternative other than what they were doing, whether it's through word of mouth, spamming WhatsApp groups, and other things. So from there on, I started to continue to learn and discover how I can build a more robust solution to where now the user is in control. I
Hmm.
build the technology, I build a platform, and the user creates their own events, they manage their own events, they tag it to the appropriate category, and now it's discoverable to anyone with access to that website. And that's what we did earlier in March, where we launched a kind of version 0 MVP product to kind of validate that. And alhamdulillah, we got a ton of feedback where it resonated with a lot of people. Now, where we are today is we've taken the feedback, made version 1, which is going to be released very soon here, more aesthetic, more user friendly, and more features where users can ticket events, they can process it, and essentially it functions and acts like an Eventbrite, but it's for Muslims.
Hmm. So let me ask you this: have you actually launched this to the larger community? You mentioned you're about to launch V1. So did you have a like if someone wanted to go right now and build an event on this platform or create an event and get people to attend, are they able to do so or not yet?
Yeah, so how we're doing it, great question. How we're doing it now, we're launching by select cities in
Okay.
the US and Canada, but we're starting with Dallas, Houston, smaller cities, getting users to test it out.
Hmm.
And as we test it out, get more feedback, and we will eventually launch to the wider community in the
Hmm.
US and even outside
Hmm.
the US, where we're getting lots of demand or interest in the product.
Hmm. So let me ask you this. It sounds like you're still in the development stages, in the early stages, but I think this is a really beneficial conversation to have because a lot of people that listen to this podcast are also working to build their own businesses and in these initial stages as well. And you're
Mm,
building, of course, what sounds like a SaaS platform, right? So software as a service, you're providing the software
precisely.
platform as some type of service for your customers. Now,
Mhm.
when you're building a platform like this, there are of course a few things to keep in mind in terms of how you can go about it in a way that is still lean because you're a startup, right? And you don't want to essentially have your business require too many resources, too much capital at first when you're still building things out. So, how was your approach? Can you tell us more about your approach for kind of the high level bird's eye view, how you went through those initial stages from idea to conceptualization to ultimately building out the platform and getting to this V1 stage?
Mm, great question. Initially when I began, I thought I needed to raise thousands of dollars and build this app and without even spending time discovering the problem space or speaking to the users. That's just was my thinking. And fortunately, it didn't work out that way because I would have wasted a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
But the approach that I took was really talking to users in the community who share the same frustrations or experience I had, and lo and behold, a lot of people I talked to in my local community in different parts of the world, and as I traveled, they all had a problem with discoverability and the current approach. So I pretty much just was documenting my learnings as in the interviews that I was having with people and documenting that and just following the playbook of the typical startup. So I started learning about how, YCs build companies. I went through the startup school that they offered last summer.
Hmm.
So just did the entire playbook of, just building the minimum viable product to validate your assumption
Hmm.
before going and, building out this crazy solution.
Hmm.
And it's helped me a lot to get to the point where we are today, where we're still taking that approach where we have an entire product roadmap already, but we're continuously iterating and releasing until we get to where we need to be.
Hmm. So how did you go about in terms of resources and managing that? I mean, were you the person doing all the coding and development?
No, so that was one of the biggest challenges that I had actually, because although I do come from a technology background, I'm not a coder myself. So I try to do that, because I'm pretty much bootstrapping. So I tried to use these no-code tools that was available, and some of it worked and some of it didn't. And I eventually had to, outsource it to a development team offshore.
Hmm.
And you know how that could be a challenge sometimes finding the right person to
Yeah.
to kind of just bring the ball. But alhamdulillah, we found a good group of developers to pretty
Hmm.
much work with us, and we are now on our way to releasing version one, which I'm very excited about.
Okay. So how did you go about gathering the financing for this? Or you mentioned bootstrapping, so I'm guessing you're paying for this out of your own pocket at
Yeah,
this point.
yes, yes, yes. So pretty much I've been covering the cost of everything up until now.
How does that feel?
Tough, but alhamdulillah, because I'm trying to really get some traction before, going the investment route,
Hmm.
just building what I can, because I know the process and I know, alhamdulillah, things worked out the way they did because essentially I thought I needed thousands of dollars, but I don't, especially with a lot of tools and resources that are available. My goal is to really bring version one to the market, get some traction, get some users, get the community to realize the value of this product. And as we grow and try to look for product market fit and scale, naturally, we would explore, going that route to push our vision to realization.
How would you monetize a platform like this? Would you essentially maybe give them the option to pay to promote it to users?
Yeah, so there's several ways we're looking to monetize the platform, and one of the ways is through ticketing. If users are
Right.
having tickets for the event, we definitely would charge a small percentage for that. One of the other ways as well is through sponsored content or sponsored events. You're
Hmm.
having a big event and you're inviting a big name or whoever it is, and you want it to be featured on the homepage or the hero section of Qariyb. That's another way we're looking to monetize. And as a SaaS product, once we get to that stage where we have a mobile application, we would monetize based off of premium features where that would give access to users for certain analytics or
Hmm.
premium features that we will have in the platform.
Right. That makes sense. So, and you've been working on this for a year and a half, 2 years, you mentioned?
Yeah, 2.5 years.
2.5 years, mashallah. So, two and a half
Yeah.
years, you're bootstrapping it yourself. You put your own money in to build this platform. And you're not at the point yet where you've actually monetized and been able to see an ROI. It's interesting for me to highlight this because a lot of people get in business and their expectation is like, I need to make money within the first like 3 months, usually even shorter. And then when they don't, they get really frustrated and they just quit. And you've been at it for 2.5 years, mashallah, really maintaining a long term vision and focus. And that's not something that I actually come across a lot in the world of entrepreneurship. A lot of people are short term focused. So I'd like to touch upon that with you. Where does that
Mhm.
stem from, in your opinion? And also, like, how do you keep going when you see your bank account getting lower, but you're not seeing anything coming in the business?
Wow, where does it come from? I think just my upbringing, really coming from a background of humble beginnings, parents immigrated here to this country, just doing the best they could to provide for us. and watching my father, do multiple businesses or have hustles. My father, mashallah, he's an imam. He's established a community here, and it's been running for the last 25 years. So
mashallah.
just being in having that firsthand exposure of dawah, community service, community development is kind of just what continues to drive me and push me. And I know that this would essentially benefit Muslims. That's really what keeps me going, like how it would benefit other people in terms of, it's more than just discovering events. It's connecting the community, and it's and aligns with, and that's why I love what you're doing, because it's just all about building a community, fostering relationships, and getting to know one another. And I think
Hmm.
that, I can achieve that with Qariyb and through users connecting through events.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting because when I first saw it, like what I thought was meetup.com for Muslims. And I think it's a very simple idea and it's simple to understand. And it's
Mhm.
also extremely clever because, like, I'll be honest, I live in Montreal, Canada. I forgot to ask you where you're based. Well, I guess you're based in Dallas because that's where you guys are starting.
Exactly.
Yeah, it makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah,
So,
exactly.
so I'm based in Montreal, Canada. And, around here we have I'm not going to say 100 mosques, but I think we definitely have at least close to 50 mosques in the city, and every single one has its own kind of like micro community, right?
Hmm.
And for someone like myself, I mean, I go to the mosque beside my house, but there might be another mosque doing an amazing event or something really interesting that I'd want to attend. Like for example, recently I actually went up to the imam in my mosques and I'm like, are there any halaqas for adults? And he's like, well, not really. And I'm like, really? Oh, that's kind of disappointing. But it would be cool. But then I'm like, okay, where do I go? And am I going to now drive to every mosque to find out which one has halaqas for adults? So it's I do feel like it is a real problem for someone like me who grew up in a city that is in the Western world and that is surrounded by mosques, but no real kind of like integration between any of them. It's
Hmm.
really hard for me to stay in touch with the community here and also to kind of really understand what's happening around me and what can I take part in to help stay connected to Islam, keep my iman increasing, be surrounded by other Muslim brothers and sisters. And it really is truly an amazing, amazing thing that you're doing, mashallah. My only
Well,
question is, can we get can we actually get mosques to adopt this? Because they are very slow to do anything technology related. Your app might end up being used by a completely different demographic. And I'm curious if you have thought of that, if you've spoken to any organizations, and also if you've even thought of alternate target audiences that could benefit from this platform. Maybe someone's listening to this that could use your platform.
No, that's a really good point. And in the beginning of this process, first of all, I empathize with what you're saying. That's a real big problem, especially in the West,
Mm-hmm.
just that connectivity and just wanting to get involved
Mm.
locally, or how you can, perhaps you want to volunteer your time sometimes to a charity
Yeah.
or an activity, but you just don't know how to get plugged in. But getting mosques involved is a challenge because typically it's just very, how they are. They're very bureaucratic, or how they operate.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the strategy that I'm using is really smaller organizations outside of masajids, like community spaces. And there are a few mosques that see the value and are interested. But I think once we start working closely with these small users that we are working with, that are associated with the mosque, they'll then see the value and they'll definitely jump on board because
Mm-hmm.
they have a need for it, even though they don't realize it.
Mm-hmm. Would you be open to, or have you ever considered also having the option of hosting online events? Because I would love to, for example, say, well, Ummahpreneur is hosting this like online workshop for Muslims, for example.
Yeah, so the unique thing about it is it's not just for physical events. So how it's set up is for online
Mm-hmm.
or physical events. So when you
Mm-hmm.
go into a Qariyb, you go to create an event. In the create event dialog, you add an event detail. You select whether it's in person or if it's virtual. And if it's virtual, you add a Zoom link or online link, and then you can share that. So it has that capability
Mm-hmm.
uh, built into it.
Right. So let me ask you this, at this stage that you're at, are you still solo working on this, or do you have any type of partner or team that's working on this with you?
Yeah, so I have a small team of designers and developers that are kind of on a freelance basis. And I recently brought on an advisor who has a lot of experience with this. And once we launch version one, I think we'll be looking to bring in a technical person to kind of just take over the technical side of things. And now I can just dedicate and focus my time to the front facing and business development activities.
Right.
But trying to do it all is very challenging. So I definitely um, needed to build a small team, mainly
Mhm.
technical.
Yeah. No, definitely that makes sense, man. And I can imagine,
Yeah.
because that's the reason why I was asking this question. I feel like doing something solo for 2 years and a half is definitely difficult, right? Like there's even just kind of being in your own head. It's not easy to do. So my question to you is, you've built a team, alhamdulillah. Do you have any advice for entrepreneurs when it comes to team building? Is there anything that you've learned throughout this process that, looking back, if you knew, would have helped make it easier for you to find the right people and build the right culture and team?
Yeah, it's very tough. You just have to work with folks that share the similar values and have the same vision, same work ethic, good character, trustworthy. It's really the soft stuff. Sometimes, you can have the skills, but as an individual, that's kind of what I look a lot for. How are you committed to your work, and what do people say about you? So trying to understand your philosophy, your approach to life, your values helps me understand you, who you are, and if we could align and work together. And it's
Hmm.
all about like building that culture, right?
For sure. So, in terms of your user acquisition strategy, how do you plan to go about that part of the business?
So how we plan to acquire users, we have a small group of users now ready to use the platform. It's about, 1,000 people ready to use the platform. And I think once we um, open it up to other people, word of mouth, and a few, marketing tactics, but nothing too, exhaustive. But really, word of mouth is what we're trying to do in the beginning before we have invest too heavy in the marketing side. And I think with the networks that we have, alhamdulillah, and where we're positioned, we can do that relatively quickly.
Hmm. Awesome, mashallah. I'm really excited to see the
Yeah,
launch of this platform and kind of see where it goes and what you're able to do with it.
I
If I was to
appreciate
add,
it.
yeah, I'm really, really excited, honestly. And let me know when you do release it, because we'll spread the word about it in our community as well, in the Ummahpreneur community, inshallah. But
Inshallah.
in terms of, if I were to kind of, wrap up this conversation with a question that's all encompassing, can you tell me about what the greatest lesson is that you've learned so far from these past 2.5 years of entrepreneurship that you can maybe share with us? If someone came up to you and said, "I want to become an entrepreneur," can you give me like one golden nugget that I can use on my journey?
Yeah, I would say just keep going. You hear
Mm,
this, it becomes a cliche, but really I've had to continue to keep pushing myself
mm,
to get to where I am today because it gets challenging, whether it's being in your own head or wondering if it's going to work or resonate with people. Just keep pushing yourself and keep getting stuff done. I think nowadays we have enough resources out there, enough information to where you don't have to just think so deeply that you actually don't do anything at all. Like,
mm,
so just as you think, do, as you think, do, and keep pushing yourself and just don't give up.
mm.
That's really it.
Such,
Just persevere.
yeah, such a simple piece of advice, but so important, and something that even resonates with me. Even on this
Yeah,
point in Ummahpreneur and all the businesses that I build, there are times where I'm like burnt out and exhausted. I'm like, "Ah, I don't know if I can keep doing this, because
yeah,
a business does take a lot out of you. It takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of like mental energy.
yeah.
SubhanAllah. So hearing this also, like, it's good for me because it's always an important
Alhamdulillah,
reminder.
alhamdulillah,
But one thing I can
alhamdulillah.
definitely share from personal experience as well, on this topic is, I think the biggest thing that is important to remember when we're approaching business is how can we set up our workflow in a way where we can be consistent long term. Like I've fallen into the trap where I've overworked myself multiple times, and every time I do that, I end up burning out. And I think if you can find like a pace where you can remain consistent, and you can keep going long term, that is really going to be the key to success. And it falls in line exactly with what you mentioned.
Mhm.
Because I think a big trap people do is they get overexcited. The beginning of a business is always fun. Like coming up with the idea, I think the early stages of a business are always the most exciting. You're coming up with the idea, you're finding the team, you're thinking about if it's going to work. Then the actual day-to-day application, that's where it starts to get a little bit more difficult, maybe a little
Exactly.
bit more challenging, maybe a little bit more boring as well. And it's like, are you going to
Exactly.
keep going when it gets to that phase? Right?
Exactly. Exactly. And that's when it becomes important to realize, where your intention is, why you're even doing this, because that's what's going to continue to motivate you
Mm-hmm.
in the long term. And the reality is you will have these emotional roller coasters of being burnt out, but it's important that, you take the time out, you reset and you go back to the drawing board sometimes if you need to. But really just checking yourself helps out.
Definitely. Is there a question
Uh,
that I didn't ask you, Abubakar, about Qariyb or entrepreneurship in general that you feel like I should have, that you wanted to share with the audience?
I think you asked some really amazing questions, and just to touch upon the advice and tips. Alhamdulillah, having people in my network who've done similar things. Yes, the resources are available. You can read up on things online, but also I would add surrounding yourself with other visionaries and entrepreneurs who think like you. Sometimes you might have conversations with your friends who might not, think in an entrepreneurial form or not see your vision. And so if you're having these conversations and you're not getting the feedback, it might discourage you and you might stop doing what you're doing. So surrounding yourself with people who are heading in the same direction. And we hear this stuff all the time. It almost it's funny that, you say these things, but and they sound cliche, but it's true. You just have to surround yourself with like-minded folks.
hmm Definitely. 100%, brother. I completely agree. Your network is your net worth, as they say. And it's important to have that supportive system, especially in times where, the going gets tough. That's where you can
Mhm.
go and lean on that support system to help you have that energy and that force to push through, inshallah. Abu Bakr, Jazakallah
Uh,
khair for joining me on this podcast, brother. How can people go and enjoy Qariyb? What's the ETA for being able to sign up to the platform, inshallah?
So the ETA is about 2 weeks, inshallah. They can go
Amazing.
to Qariyb.com, QARIYB.com, and sign up for our updates. And they can follow us on our Instagram page at QARIYB, and stay tuned for updates on the launch.
It's amazing, inshallah. We'll make sure to share those links in the episode notes and in the description. Abu Bakr, Jazakallah khair for joining me, brother. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I'm looking forward to the launch of Qarib. I can't wait to see what it's going to be like.
Inshallah.
And I'm looking forward to using it myself and hopefully discovering some local events. So I'm excited for you guys to roll out in Montreal and hopefully other parts of the world soon, inshallah.
Definitely, definitely. Jazakallah khair, and thank you so much having me, Avi. It was a pleasure.
Pleasure's all mine, brother. Thank you.